Welcome everyone to the finals playoff between Aravindh Chithambaram and Levon Aronian at the Chennai Grand Masters 2024. Levon has just beaten Arjun Erigaisi in the semi-finals and now takes on Aravindh for the first and second spot. 3 minutes plus 2 seconds increment, 2 games, and in case of 1-1 tie, we'll go into an Armageddon. Shake of hands and the game begins. D4 knight f6, knight to f3 by Aravindh, e6 played, and Aravindh goes for the e3 variation, the Cole system, closing in his bishop but opening up the other bishop. b6, the bishop comes out, you fianchetto the bishop, and now castles. Levon pushes his pawn right into the center with d5, and Aravindh brings his knight out to d2. Knight comes out to d7, and now b3 for the other bishop will be placed on b2. Where will Levon play next? He goes knight e4, and Aravindh quickly plays his bishop to b2. The main idea of Aravindh is to have quick development, maybe c4 followed by queen c2, and he's already putting a lot of pressure on Aronian on the clock. He has 2 minutes 30 seconds and Aravindh has his full 3 minutes. Bishop comes out to d6 and c4 is played. Levon quickly castles. Now Aravindh thinking a bit, because he can play his queen to e2, he can play it to c2, he can go rook c1, so many possible moves here. He brings his rook to c1. 2 minutes 42 seconds for Aravindh, 2 minutes 20 seconds for Levon. a5 is played. Maybe at some point he wants to break through with the idea of a4. The queen comes out to c2, putting pressure here on the knight. And now if you take, I'll take back with the knight with the idea of e4. f5 is also a good move here for black. So we'll see if Levon tries to play with f5 or takes on d2. Well, he's thinking here, and this is the thing about Levon. He takes his time in the opening and then speeds up later. So here knight takes knight. Well, if you take with the queen here, the problem is after d takes c4, he can take the knight. So knight takes is much better. But now queen h4. He plays h6 instead, which is slightly passive. And Aravindh breaks in the center with e4. Now de4 is one option. There's also a possibility to push c5 and really make the game fully complicated. What will be Levon's choice? Because after c5 you also have e5, but in this case takes on e4. And Aravindh takes with the bishop. If queen comes to h4, in order to threaten a mate, we have the move g3. See, now Levon down to a minute almost on his clock, while Aravindh has couple of minutes here. Seems like Levon is trying to assess what is better for him. He goes queen h4, threatening a mate in one here. Now if g3, you first play bishop e4, and then after knight e4 play your queen back or put it on h3. That is one way to continue. There's also h3 here, which might be also possible. And I think Aravindh is taking his time between these two moves, because both of them look pretty decent. He plays pawn to g3, bishop takes bishop, knight takes, and Levon plays queen h3. Maybe the queen is slightly misplaced here. If you take take and play bishop a3. That might be possible. But then the knight could come to f6 with the idea of knight g4, and it can become quite complicated. So whether he will take here or not is the question. He plays pawn to f4. And now a good move here is rook e8. Just coming out of this knight d6, cd6, bishop a3 ideas. But he played f5. Now this is not a good move. This is actually very weakening. And Arvind can actually take now and play the bishop a3 idea. That would be very strong. Will he be able to find it is the question. Yes, he does. Takes, bishop to a3, attacking the pawn on d6. He goes knight to f6, takes the pawn, rook f d8, and now the bishop will sit very strongly on the e5 square. Arvind is a pawn up and he's played really well. Knight to g4, threatening a fork here. Have to be careful. Maybe queen e2 makes a lot of sense. Just bringing the queen on that central square. Yes, he does. Queen e2. And now rook a c8. Arvind playing really strong chess here. And pushes his pawn to a4, stopping all the queenside counterplay of black. And Levon has 43 seconds. Arvind has 39. Rook a e1. And at some point the d5 break will be coming in. He goes rook c6, d5, bring the bishop back and then enter in is the idea. Plays his rook to f3 and rook d7 by Levon. And now the rook comes to d3, preparing d5. g5, that is too risky. Now d5, ed and bishop b2 with the idea of queen e8 or e6 is pretty good, but he first goes rook d2, preparing it, defending h2. Levon goes back rook c8, and now Arvind goes d5. He does not hesitate. If ed5, just bishop b2, and this is game over. Beautiful chess here by Arvind. He takes, and now time to get the bishop back. Arvind has some few seconds left, but he blunders bishop d6. His point is if you take, there is queen e7, but queen h2. What a beautiful move by Levon. First deflecting the queen, and now taking the bishop. The position has suddenly equalized. From being clearly better, it's now equal. King f6. What a turnaround this is. But Arvind keeping his cool, starting to move faster. gf. In fact, at this point, Levon is also a pawn up, but Arvind wins the pawn back, takes, and he takes with the pawn, threatening rook e6 check. He goes rook c2 check, king comes back, and Arvind must be right now not so happy with how this game has gone, but he has no time for all of that. He needs to keep moving. The rook endgame is currently drawn, but he still has some chances. Won a pawn. Take. And now white has two pawns against black's one pawn. The position should be still a draw, but black has to be accurate. Aronian cannot just play any move and get a draw. b4. He brings his rook here. Rook c5 check would be winning now. a6. And now king e2. The two pawns are very strong. In fact, now Arvind is completely winning. He puts his rook here. And now rook f7. King b8 should be a draw now. Last move was a mistake, but a7 comes in. And Levon resigns now because check and queen would happen, or b6, b7. And Arvind wins this What a game that was. A roller coaster where Arvind was pushed to the limit there. He was better but then made a mistake. And now it's time to go for the second game. Arvind has the black pieces and needs to hold off Levon Aronian. It's not going to be easy. Levon so tricky even in the last game. He took all his chances towards the end, but Arvind managed to triumph. Also, it has a lot to do with the fact that Levon has played 3 games of blitz before this against Arjun, and the game starts now. E4, E5, knight to F3, knight C6, and the Italian game bishop C5. The knight comes out to C3, and he goes knight F6, D3, calmly playing here. Arvind plays pawn to H6. So Levon choosing a very sedate line with symmetrical development. Bishop comes out to E3 and pawn to D6. He takes. Maybe D6 was a mistake because now bishop B5, and the threat is to take on C6 and take on E5. All of a sudden, right out of the opening, Aravindh Chithambaram has landed in a almost lost position. Not a lost one, you can say -1, because he's going to get triple pawns or he's going to lose a pawn. So Arvind goes bishop G4. And Levon takes on C6, tripling these pawns. So very nice advantage for Levon out of the opening. But it's still interesting. I think it's blitz, so anything is possible. In a classical game, this would have been nightmare. And now Levon taking his time to figure out what is the best way to put pressure on his opponent. He goes B3. He sees that there's not much problem here. C4 should not be allowed. Okay, Arvind can take and play queen D4, pinning here and attacking, but there is king D2 to save it, so it shouldn't be a big problem. Now Arvind is calculating all the possibilities here. How should he create counterplay is the question. He first castles, and this pin is a bit irritating, you must agree. I mean, I won't like to play H3, G4. He goes castles first, knight D7, maybe with the idea of pushing F5 next. And Levon plays H3, bishop moves backwards. And now G4 should be a possible move, because with G4 you clamp down on F5 and the bishop has to go back. Yes, you weaken your F4 square, but rook E8 played, queen E2, rook E8, and Levon now pushes bishop G6 and queen E3. But now Arvind can go knight F8, knight E6. Okay, firstly the C5 pawn is hanging, so he must do something about it. He brings his queen to E7. Can Levon attack it even more with knight A4? For now he plays his king to H2. And Arvind has 1 minute 50 seconds, 1 minute 43 seconds for Levon. Brings his knight to F8, knight A4, the knight jumps in. Great play here. Now the thing is, can you capture this pawn on E5 is the question, because otherwise I'm going to D4 or coming to F4. Because if you take, he takes it, by the way. Arvind, I'm sure, is a bit surprised because he has this idea of knight D4. And the point here is that this is hanging and this is hanging on c2. But very important to protect here, because after knight c2 you have queen c5, knight a1, queen takes, rook takes, and rook a1, with a clear advantage here for white, because the knights are better than the rooks in this position. But to find this is not going to be easy for Levon. He takes on g6, and this is not a great idea, because now Arvind can take fg, play g5, rook f8, rook f4, other rook goes, and he's going to play on the dark squares. He takes back, rook d1, he pushes his pawn to g5. Levon now kicks the knight away. He brings his knight to e6, and now pawn to d4. Take, take, and rook a d8. He's keeping up the pressure on the d4 pawn. Knight to c3 played here by Levon, and knight d4, a tactical shot. So if rook d4, there is queen e5, double check, the check, double attack. So he goes king g2, and Arvind has won a pawn. He just needs a draw in this game, and he should be able to get it. Queen e5. Next move, he would like to play pawn to c5, rook d2 played by Levon, and Arvind definitely getting a bit tensed here, because the entire tournament is on the line. He can win the event, but first he must figure out what to play here. c5, he goes rook to f8, and now can Levon double it here? Rook fd1. I think he can. He goes f3, and now the knight comes back. Knight e2, controlling the f4 square. He takes, queen takes, rook comes to d8. Very logical play here by Arvind. He's put pressure step by step on his opponent. c5, and now rook d1, offering a trade of rooks. He takes, queen takes, and now queen b2, pinning the knight. So king comes back to f1, and now he can take the a2 pawn, but goes to d4. He must take now the knight, but already the position is quite bad for white if he wants to win, because a win is a must here for Levon. He goes queen d3, and now takes the pawn. So Arvind is a pawn up. Queen c4 check, king at 7. He should take on d4 now, but instead pushes e5. But now the king and pawn endgame is lost. He could have taken queen e2, and that was also winning, but queen b3 also equally strong. Knight b3, and now bringing his knight in, but Arvind is simply material up. He's 2 pawns up, and he should be able to win this. 4 takes, king takes, g5, knight d2, and now a check, and it's over. Levon resigns with a smile on his face. Arvind gets a pat on the back from the arbiters. He's the local lad here. Everyone cheers for him, and Adiban comes in, gives him a hug.